another video.
And gentlemen, let's welcome my guest, Sterling Bennett from 49ers Access. Bro, how's it going?
I'm doing great. We've been working on this for a long time. Finally figured out a time for us to get this thing going on. I'm really excited to be here. I watched your Burford interview, and I also watched the golf on Mike Silver, so I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, yeah, for sure, man. I mean, you've been covering the Niners as of lately with the training camp stuff, right?
Yeah, I've been there every single day. The first week I was there for a little bit, but this past week I was there all day, both days of pads as well. So I've been in Santa Clara what seems like every single day covering this team since training camp started.
Oh, that's tight, man. So give me your updates on what stood out to you, since we're looking at training camp updates, man. Like what player that caught your attention and what was good about this practice?
Yes, I mean, if you want to start at the quarterbacks, we definitely can. I think Brock Purdy had a pretty good day yesterday. I know many people will make a big deal about the near sacks and near interceptions. I don't love doing that because I think it takes away the ability of the quarterback to avoid a sack, which Purdy's done a lot so in his career in San Francisco. Near picks, I think one's mitigated by a defensive holding call that many people haven't mentioned. So I think Purdy had his best practice yesterday. I think Trey Lance has put together 3 really good practices back to back to back. Obviously, you can nitpick on certain throws. His first throw of the day was an incompletion and an accurate throw to George Kittle on a dump off. But outside of that, I think he put together 3 really good practices. We're starting to see Trey Lance grow. The only question is when they come back tomorrow on Thursday, is that going to continue or is it going to revert back to what he looked like early in training camp? Sam Darnold yesterday had a couple near picks again, mostly good plays by the defense. Dee Winters stood out yesterday, a good pass block. Young linebackers really stood out yesterday. Again, Dee Winters, McCrary Ball, Demetrius Flanagan Falls all had big plays, either pass blocks or would-be sacks or near picks. They were all over the field. I thought Alex Barrett was pretty good yesterday, had a couple of pressures. But going into what I thought was the biggest plus of yesterday's practice, that was the young receivers. Danny Gray had a strong practice, nice blocking downfield, a couple of big catches with Yak afterwards. Ronnie Bell, a couple of nice catches, a lot of blocking down the field. Again, if you don't block, you ain't getting the ball. Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's how Shanahan does it, man. No block, no rock. So it's
right, and he's blocking. It's a good sign to see for a young player trying to prove himself and make this team. When the pads have come on, he's definitely picked his game up. Obviously, you have Deebo Samuel doing his thing, Juwan Jennings doing his thing as well. I mean, this receiving core is explosive, and if the young guys can contribute, it's a great thing for San Francisco.
Oh, I like that positive vibe. I mean, the quarterback position, it's kind of been positive. Like, they've been completing their passes here and there. I mean, we get a lot of these mixed reviews, but I've seen the completion percentage. I've seen the stat-wise. It don't mean nothing until we see what happens in preseason and the regular season. Right. But Brock Purdy's kind of shaking off the rust. I see that even when Colin Farrell did accidentally hit his elbow, he kind of showed the toughness. He didn't seem bothered with the setback or nothing. He just seemed like he was already looking back to form. So that was the only concern mark was can Brock Purdy shake off that rust and shake off the potentially maybe a major setback, which he didn't get that. So I want to see more of how he does, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think with Purdy, when that play happened, there was an audible gasp because you're not supposed to touch the quarterback.
Yeah.
And it did seem like Farrell got the ball clean, and Purdy, again, walked to the sideline and wasn't a problem for him. He mentioned on KMVR the next day, I feel fine. Obviously, he took the most reps in practice yesterday, and his arm seemed fine. I will say this. Hearing all of the coaches and Kyle Shanahan and even players like Colton McKivitz yesterday saying he's back early. He was not supposed to be back this soon. There is definite rust to his game, but the pocket presence is still there. I think it is limited or at least hindered because of where the entire offense stands when the team is doing team drills. So basically what I'm saying is that they're snapping the ball and the offensive line is right here. Purdy's here, and the entire offense is behind him, so he can't move backwards. It's only left to right. And so for him, the mobility is a little limited, not because of him physically, but because of where people are standing behind him. But the pocket presence is there. He's moving well in the pocket, going to his left, going to his right, evading pressure easily. But with Purdy, you can tell early in training camp there was some rust. You can tell that maybe he isn't 100%, maybe he's 85%, and that's okay. I played baseball for a long time. I had an elbow injury. It takes time to stretch that thing back out. You're not going to come in day one and be throwing that thing 65 yards, 50 yards. It takes time. He's already doing stuff like that during warm-ups and one-on-ones. He's flinging that thing around. I think the arm strength from sideline to sideline is currently lacking, but once he gets you into the 100% level, he should be okay. Yesterday was a good sign from him. Definitely eager to see what he looks like on Thursday, and I'm not sure if he'll play in the preseason. I know fans and people in the media are kind of torn on that, considering he kind of already has that starting quarterback label next to his name.
Why risk it?
Right, like should he play? I think maybe give him 1 or 2 drives in the last game of the year or last game of preseason. Let that be his dress rehearsal, see what he can do. But other than that, this team is his. I think the quarterback competition is kind of sealed up for starting quarterback. But Trey and Darnold are definitely pushing hard to win that quarterback number 2 job, which I think has everyone's eyes currently.
I mean, I guess you don't want to like risk it going into the preseason, but yeah, a couple of drives maybe would be nice in the last preseason just to get it, see what he can do with the offense and see if we can get a rhythm. But as long as he practices and does what he does, I think he'll be all right. I mean, it's a positive sign just to hear it from your reports and saying that there hasn't been much of a setback for him even when Clelin Ferrell wasn't supposed to touch him, because, you know, you're not supposed to touch the red jersey and any of that stuff. And that's how the football rules are, and it kind of seemed concerning. But then he kind of just showed that reaction, didn't seem bothered by it. So usually when you have that kind of injury, they want to see if he's tough for it, and he didn't seem to have any issue with it. So we'll see what happens. But Trey, man, I don't know. Like, Trey's just looking a lot better. I mean, what's your thoughts of Trey?
Yeah, I think with Trey, I was there in minicamp and OTAs, and he didn't start off very hot. But you can tell, like Purdy, coming off an injury, Trey had already been throwing for a couple months prior to OTAs and minicamp. But you can tell there was this, I have to get myself back into playing football against the defense again, not just playing one-on-ones or throwing drills to wide open receivers. And so I think as OTAs and minicamp progressed, you can see that he started to get better and he got more comfortable in the pocket. And I think he's carried that over into training camp. He had a couple rough days initially, but once pads have come on, I think we have seen Trey start to build momentum. Now, how much is that? I don't know. He can easily suck tomorrow and we go, well, what is Trey Lance again, right? But I think the last 3 days have been his best that I've seen in the summer. And if he continues to do that, I don't see a reason why Shanahan wouldn't trust him being this team's number 2 quarterback behind Brock Purdy. And again, if he still does this day in, day out, continues to stack days, I don't see why Shanahan wouldn't believe in him if Purdy does happen to go down, God forbid, or something happens. He's been more confident in the pocket. He's standing tall. He's scrambling a lot, which is good, using his legs. Other guys on this team can't do that stuff at quarterback. He can. My question with him has always been the inaccuracies and the inconsistencies. They're still there. They're just lesser than they were, a year or 2 ago.
A lot better.
Right. And so, like, the arm strength is still there. I think he has the strongest arm on this team. I also think Sam Darnold has the best arm on this team, and I'll explain. When you combine, like, strength-wise, Trey Lance wins that hands down. He can throw the ball 70 yards through the air, right? Sam Darnold has the strength and the accuracy. I know he's turnover prone, but the arm talent's always been there for Sam Darnold. Talk to anybody in the NFL, the scouts. There's a reason why he was a top 5 pick. There's a reason why Carolina believed in him, even though he didn't play great there. The arm talent's always been there. It's always been decision-making. And I think for him, it's going to come down to Does Shanahan trust him? And can he limit turnovers? I could argue playing here in San Francisco with this team, this head coach, and this offense, it's going to make those turnovers go down because receivers are going to be a lot more wide open for him instead of having to throw guys open like he had to do in Carolina or in New York. But going back to Trey, I like what I've seen. And I think the past 2 years being down there, seeing him in training camp and OTAs, this is the best version of Trey Lance I have seen in 2 years. The question is that enough for Kyle Shanahan? And I'm not sure. We'll obviously see going forward, though.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to make the improvements. He's got to make huge progress because last year he was already the no question the starter from right off the bat. Now the injury kind of hurt him from there. Brock Purdy's already earning the right because he already took this team further. I mean, there's what's there not to like about the kid? He's a winner. So, I mean, Sam Darnold, we can say what we want to say about this guy. He's played 55 games in the NFL. He's been on 2 different teams. Maybe it's just not maybe the environment is just not a fit. But I guess Sam Darnold's kind of learned the difference of playing in San Francisco. He's already talking about how these other receivers are wide open. Like he's never seen it before. Like even with the Jets or with the Panthers, he never had to see a receiver wide open that quick.
Yeah, I think with Sam Darnold, I know many fans and even Kyle Shanahan pointed to Steve Young. I don't like that interpretation because Steve Young's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and I don't think Sam Darnold's that by any means. I think of Sam Darnold more as maybe an Alex Smith kind of guy.
Alex Smith.
And he probably has a better arm talent than Alex Smith did coming out of Utah, but I view him as a guy who hasn't really gotten a fair shake, played on multiple bad teams, had a defensive-minded interim head coach last year in Steve Wilks, had his head coach last year get fired halfway through the season in Matt Rule. And then New York, Adam Gase was a freaking mess, and that's just the way it was. And that team was awful on and off the field and up top and on bottom, right? And so has he gotten a fair shake? Probably not. But with Sam Darnold, I think if we're going to talk about reclamation projects with him, his ceiling to me is Alex Smith. The question is, do you, being a fan, do I, covering the team, you also covering the team, fans in the faithful community, do they believe in Sam Darnold? I would tend to believe not because he hasn't shown that yet. And I would tend to think Kyle Shanahan, unlike the fans, believes that he actually has a lot to work with. And I think fans, maybe to their disgust, should open their mind to Sam Darnold actually playing this year and actually succeeding. Now, if Trey Lance balls out, maybe it doesn't happen. If Purdy gets hurt, who knows? So many things can happen until week 1 of the NFL season. But I would start to open our minds to Sam Darnold actually playing this year, which if you would have told me last year, I would have said you're full of it. But the way he's played and the way Kyle Shanahan talks about him, I do think there's a good chance he might play if Purdy does go down.
So there's a good issue to have. So you would have 2 capable backs that can even compete for that starting role. But yeah, Sam Darnold just hasn't got a fair chance. I mean, maybe the supporting cast he had then just wasn't cutting it. I mean, the Jets, you had Adam Gase, it was a dysfunctional. I mean, then in Carolina, he goes from the guy who was a college coach into a defensive-minded coach, and usually that takes time. So I can see where you're getting the Alex Smith comparison because, to be fair with Alex Smith, he played through a defensive-mind coach. He played through so many offensive coordinator changes. So it's hard to learn the playbook. So when you're playing football and you have to go through an OC change every year, that's like changing underwears or something like that, changing your socks, and you don't know what the next – it's like a box of chocolate too. You never know what could happen. But Alex Smith had to deal with that throughout his career. Like the first 8 years, it was challenging. Once Harbaugh came, his career was turned around. I don't know if Shanahan can be that kind of guy because Harbaugh was a QB coach. He was more of a QB guy. And to be honest, Shanahan is more of a receiver guy.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to Jim Harbaugh and using the Alex Smith comparison with Sam Darnold, I don't know if you remember what Jim Harbaugh did with Alex Smith to convince him, hey, you're my quarterback. Took him outside when Smith worked out in the facility, took him outside and played catch, got to know him a little bit and goes, hey, I trust you. I believe in you. Shanahan's not going to do that. He's going to be in the study room telling guys what they did wrong, how can they improve, and then letting Brian Greasy do his job. Letting someone like Jeff Christensen help improve Trey Lance outside of the facility, right? Shanahan's much more of the X's and O's guy, not the, hey, let's go out and play catch kind of guy. I mean, we know Shanahan's being quarterback one during practice sometimes too, so he has that mentality in him. But when it comes back to Sam Darnold, I think stability does a lot for a quarterback that's never had it. He came out of USC, I believe, as a sophomore, maybe a junior. A lot of expectations on him, big city vibes under the bright lights at MetLife in New York, scrutinized nonstop. Joe Flacco gets hurt. He's thrust into the spotlight, loses to Baker Mayfield in Baker Mayfield's first game. Just an awful scenario for a young quarterback trying to prove himself, constantly compared to Mayfield and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And he's been bad. Let's not make this, that he's been an amazing quarterback elsewhere. He's been bad. The day they signed him, we all said, quarterback number 3, he also might get cut. But the way he's played, I think, throughout training camp, if you would have if you would have asked me, pick a day, which quarterback has won each day? I think Sam Darnold has won 4 of the 7 days, 4 of the 6 days so far. And I think it's 4 days to Darnold compared to 3 days to Trey. And it's starting to get tight. And if Trey can continue to push and push and push, I see no reason why he can't overtake Sam Darnold and win that quarterback number 2 job.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have when you have those two guys competing for it. And then Brock Purdy's already proven himself, even with this situation. But when you look at the rest of the groups, okay, so there's a couple of players who stood out. Like, I don't know about these other tight ends, man, but I'm kind of like confused with it too. We drafted this kid so high, but I like Braden Willis. Braden Willis seems like he could be a tight end number 2.
Yeah, I think with Latu, the conversation around San Francisco is high upside, former defensive player converted to tight end, still learning the position out of Alabama. I think they expect him to be a blocker at best this year, maybe a red zone target. But Braden Willis, to me, has shown much more in a very short period of time. And I think coming out of college, being a top end blocker, I believe he had the 3rd highest blocking rate of tight ends last year in college football. I think he makes a ton of sense to be this team's tight end number 2. They're probably going to keep 4 of them. And the question then becomes, who's the odd man out? I would lean towards it either being probably Dwelly, I think will be my pick. Jack Colletto's taking snaps at fullback. That kind of alleviates Dwelly's position outside of tight end. And if Charlie Warner is a blocking tight end and Latu is a blocking tight end and Willis is a blocking tight end, maybe they see a redundancy there to not keep Warner as well. So Goldie and Warner definitely have, these big bright lights on them to actually perform in camp this year, because Latu and Willis are fighting for that job. And Willis caught 2 passes yesterday. He looks strong again, very small sample size, very limited reps for a young player like him. But yesterday he finally showed something, whereas Latu dropped the pass yesterday from Sam Darnold. And again, if I had to hedge my bets, I would say Willis is this team's 2nd tight end going into the year. And if he isn't 2nd, definitely 3rd right now.
So just by the tight ends outside of Kittle, you think Willis is that guy, right?
He's not going to be a superstar. In my opinion, he's not going to contribute a lot. None of these guys usually do, right?
The number 2 guy was what I meant.
Right. And I think anyone being tight end number 2 in San Francisco, you have to ask them to do one of 2 things. Where can you alleviate George Kittle? Is it in the pass catching game or is it in the blocking game? I think we'd all prefer George Kittle's out there catching passes and making big splash plays for the offense. So you have to ask one of these guys, can you be the inline tight end on passing plays? And I would lean toward Willis being that guy right now.
Yeah, he's a willingness blocker, so he does a lot of the dirty work. So that's where he stands out. And Cameron Latu is a work in progress because he did make that switch from defense to offense. So that does take some time to adjust. But he's kind of made that transition pretty good the last 2 years at Alabama. So he is a red zone threat. He's got a big body. I think as far as the tight end group, I like the group. It's a lot better than the previous years. But the question mark, everybody's kind of wondering, can Colt McKivitz really step up and be that starter, man? Because, everybody's kind of putting that question mark. I really like what I've seen from McKivitz so far.
Yeah, I think when you look at right tackle in San Francisco, it's been heavily scrutinized the past, 4 or 5 years since McGlinchey's been there. He's not a great pass blocker, but a really good run blocker, right? And I think for McKivitz, in year 1 of starting, if you can just be, 3/4 of the run blocker McGlinchey was and a slightly better pass blocker than McGlinchey, people are going to fall in love with you real quick when you're actually protecting the quarterback. But I think when you listen to everyone talk about him, the fact that they believe he's earned this job. Trent Williams talked about a couple of months ago that he's done everything right. He's picked everyone's brain. He's put in the work and got his body right. Technique is getting down every single day. And the fact that you can have an all-pro future Hall of Famer say he has earned that right tackle job, that weighs a lot on somebody. And the fact that they didn't even tell him he was going to be the starting right tackle on draft night. He was sitting there saying, am I going to get replaced this past draft? And the fact they said, nope, you're our guy, that speaks volumes to what they actually think of Colton McKivitz. And it worked last year with Banks and Brendel and Burford. I don't see why it wouldn't work with McKivitz as well. He was fine in replacement of Williams when he got hurt against the Rams last year and even 2 years ago to end the season against Los Angeles in SoFi Stadium. I have a lot of high hopes for McKivitz this year, and he actually played pretty well one-on-ones and during team drills when they've actually gotten to go pads on pads with the defense.
Yeah, he's kind of did pretty well with those full pads as far as I've heard. Even without the pads, it was a little question. But then when you look at him play with the full pads, he looks different. So I feel like that's where the confidence is with the coaching staff. Like, if you've been around this team and they develop you, they tend to want to give you the job because you've been around, you've learned the system. So they don't want to go outside and get somebody to learn the system. So it's like, it's good that we got somebody's. It's good to let him know that he's got the job. I would have preferred for us to draft some depth, but we'll see. Maybe maybe Matt Pryor might be pretty well. Maybe Jalen Moore if he's healthy. We'll see. Right. But there's a lot of question marks with that. But I feel like it's not that much of a big deal, like everybody says. Like when you look at the right side, I think Burford's going to be one of the top best guards in my opinion. I think as far as like Brendel, he's going to ascend as the starting center for us. And then you got Banks, who's already like proven not to be the weakest link at the offensive line, which we all know Trent Williams is one of the best, if not the best tackles in the business. But I feel like the offensive lineman isn't that big of a deal to me.
I don't think the starting offensive line would ever be my concern, knowing what they did last year on the field. I know there are questions around McKivitz, but my bigger concern is the depth. Many fans, including myself, and I'm sure you as well, were like, why are we not picking a tackle somewhere in the draft? Doesn't have to be third round, but fifth, sixth, seventh, someone take a tackle, right?
Somebody, yeah.
But I think with what San Francisco has done, they have put themselves in a position where if one of their starting offensive linemen go down, no matter who it is, they only have one proven backup offensive lineman, and that's John Feliciano. Outside of that, they don't have any, young upcoming backup tackles. Jalen Moore got hurt yesterday. Nobody knows how serious that is. It was his left knee. It could be a torn ACL. It can be just a bone bruise. We have no idea what it can be, and you hope it isn't serious, but still. If Jalen Moore goes down, who's this team's left tackle? Matt Pryor? I don't trust him.
I don't trust him because I've seen this film in Indianapolis, and it's concerning a little bit. So I'm like, why did we sign this guy? There's a couple of other guys out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the case now where they may need to go out and pick somebody up, and if you don't do it quickly, more guys are going to get hurt from other teams. Then it's slim pickings for who's out there for actual offensive line depth. And if you already lost your leading candidate for your backup swing tackle position, you might find yourself in trouble if Trent Williams or McKivitz go down during the year.
Yeah, I think that's going to be concerning at this point. But I feel like we need to go get ourselves a swing tackle at least. I mean, I don't know. Matt Pryor just doesn't seem like that kind of guy. He's a slow pass blocker. Doesn't seem like I've seen what led the Colts with so much disaster last year because this guy was playing that side of the field. So it's like, and he wasn't even considered like one of the top best options out there. He was like the worst.
Well, it's tough, too, because San Francisco wants to save all the money they can to carry it over into next year to hopefully extend guys like Brandon Ayuk and maybe have to use some of that money for Nick Bosa this year, right? And so they want to save money, and I get them maybe going bargain bin shopping for backup offensive linemen. That's fine. Most teams do it as well.
Yeah.
But they do that after they have drafted a young player, and they're relying currently on a bunch of guys who are unproven or a bunch of undrafted guys who could surprise for all I know, right? But right now, you can't rely on them. And that's scary thinking if Jalen Moore's out for a long period of time and if Trent Williams and McKivitz go down, you are sitting there saying, Matt Pryor, come save us. And if that's the case, my goodness, either your strong side or your blind side is going to be hurting, whether it's Purdy, Lance, or Darnold. That could be a nightmare for your offense.
Yeah, it could, because you don't know who to rely to. Because Matt Pryor, are you serious? There's quite a few other there's quite a few other options out there. I mean, I know the fans were kind of thinking this kind of question. They would think, "Oh, why not we like push Burford to play tackle?" No, they're sticking him strictly at guard at this point.
Yeah, they could do that. He played tackle in college, and I
Yes.
understand the thought process. If McKivitz goes down, you can slide Burford over maybe and put Feliciano at guard. That might be
That
your
would make
best
sense.
bet. But I don't know if they're going to want to do that. Losing Daniel Brunskill hurts this team. I know it's weird saying that because he didn't play. He wasn't the quote unquote starter, but the fact that he's played right tackle and guard and center last year, he was really valuable, and they don't have that guy anymore to be kind of your Swiss Army knife of backup offensive linemen. And so it's really tough for me to go, wow, it's not an area of concern, because it definitely is.
Yeah, it is. Brunskill did a lot, even played center all over the spots. But Feliciano, he kind of gives you a little bit of the Brunskill because he
Yeah.
can play everywhere. I think he's only played one spot of the tackle spot, except the other side. But I feel like I like the Feliciano signing because I think he does give you the versatility. But as far as a swing tackle, that is definitely a question mark. And yeah, if those two guys go down, that's a disaster. Like, are we going to rely on Matt Pryor? Are we going to try to promote Joey Fisher, who I've heard mixed reviews? I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Like, or are we just going to get some outside help or something? Or do we make this off-season trade, or do we make this like this mid-season trade? Like, let's say we go through this disaster injury and we had to make this crazy blockbuster move just to get this offensive lineman, and maybe that might save our season. I don't know. There's like one of those
thing. That's the thing, is that right now their backup left tackles are Jalen Moore, who is now hurt for who knows how long, and then Leroy Watson, who is a converted tight end, who has just now got his body right to play left tackle.
Yep.
And he hasn't been that great. He hasn't been bad by any means of the word, but he's been a third string left tackle for a reason coming into camp, and he's going to stay there for as long as he can because he hasn't shown much just yet. And so if Trent Williams, who is aging, still the best left tackle in football, but is aging, he has missed time the last 2 seasons, like, guys get hurt all the time. And if it's your offensive line, the guy's responsible for protecting the most prized position on your team, and if it's Brock Purdy, who's already been hurt last year, or if it's Trey Lance, who's already hurt the last 2 years for however long you want to account for, like, you cannot have your quarterback get hurt. There's a reason Josh Johnson was playing in the biggest game of the year. That can't happen again, and that starts up front with your 5 starting offensive linemen. And if you got bad backups and one of those guys goes down, I mean, again, it could lead to, like, it could really end your season if your quarterback gets hurt again. And that's why I think Kyle Shanahan wants to keep all 4 of those quarterbacks, because he's saying, look, my offensive line starters are really good. Outside of that, I'm not sure. And all these guys might actually play because we played 5 of them last year.
Yeah, and that's kind of like something to think about. And I'm surprised he didn't even bother to draft one. Like, does he really believe in Nick Sakel? I've heard mixed reviews about him. I think he kind of gives you that versatility a little bit. But, here's an interesting question, I guess, for John Jay, since you're from the Bay, San Francisco Bay. Question for your guest. How long have you covered the 49ers, and have you ever been to a game at Candlestick Park?
I've been covering the team since 2020. I've been at training camps the past 2 years. I work for 95.7 The Game in San Francisco, covering them. I've also hosted their post-game shows regards to the Niners, overtime. I have been to a game at Candlestick. I've been to 2 of them. My first ever one, Cody Pickett was playing quarterback against the New York Giants in 2007 when the Giants had Plaxico Burress, Eli Manning. And I looked at my uncle and I said, yeah, we're going to get our butt kicked today. He's like, no, we'll be fine. And I was like, no, we're going to get our butt kicked today. So I have been there. I miss the stick tremendously. I don't love Levi Stadium. The inside's great. The outside, not so much. I've been to one game there. Sat up front for the Washington, San Francisco game. I believe it was 2013 or 14. Frank Gore had a touchdown. We won the game, but Candlestick is by far and away has my heart of where the home of the Niners is.
Oh, it's the vibe. I've been down to one Candlestick Park game, which was in 2008 against they're no longer the Redskins, but that was one of those overtime games where we beat Jason Campbell and the Redskins. And
heck yeah.
that was when Sean Hill was on a roll. That was the year Sean Hill was playing good ball, and everybody was kind of calling him the starter, and he eventually
Yeah.
that was the question mark. Remember, Alex Smith got injured, and Trent Dilfer was hurt eventually, and then that was like a mix of disaster. But yeah, I guess in some ways, man. But yeah, I think hopefully we do address getting some quality backup offensive linemen. But like as far as like the rest of the positions, like you said, the wide receivers look like they're going to be something special. So I feel like when we drafted this kid from Michigan, I don't know how good of a chance he'll make the roster, but man, Ronnie Bell looks like he could be somebody to replace Jennings next year, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's tough when you look at what San Francisco likes out of their receivers. They want run blockers, guys who are unafraid of contact. If you're a slot guy, they want you big and physical so you can block and also, take care of a small nickel cornerback you're going to go against and line up against. Debo and Ayuk are taking care of their starters, their superstars. They are in no one's concern. Debo is in the best shape of his career. I hate saying that because it's so cliche, but he looks amazing. Ayuk has been cooking every single person he goes against. He makes Ambry Thomas look bad, and Ambry Thomas has actually looked pretty good during this camp period. I'm not saying something, but when you look at Ronnie Bell and Danny Gray and even McLeod, the one way a young receiver can make this team is to, I think, take McLeod's job. It's not going to be easy. I think McLeod played really well last year for us, and even had a big touchdown against Washington
I
when
was at
Debo wasn't playing. It was a great play. It's like a 7-yard touchdown end around is great stuff. And I think he can do some of the things that Debo Samuel can do. Obviously, not as much, but he's obviously a lot smaller than Debo. But the speed is there, the end run ability is there, and Ronnie Bell doesn't do that stuff. Ronnie Bell is a slot receiver, smaller than Juwan Jennings, and more a possession receiver. And the way he can make this roster, though, is fielding punts, fielding kicks. I think for Ronnie Bell, my biggest, if I was going to challenge him, it would be you have to be more consistent with your hands. Doesn't matter how much you block, doesn't matter how well you are route running. If you drop the ball, it doesn't matter. And I think for him, he's had that problem. So has Chris Conley in camp as well, a vet out of Jacksonville and Kansas City. He's had that problem too. Too many drops. Tay Martin, same thing. Too many drops. I know he's played better in regards to Tay Martin and actually Ronnie Bell as well, but you cannot play receiver and drop the football. Secure it,
That's
then
true.
go. And so for Ronnie Bell, it's going to be how can you play the most cleanest camp of all the receivers? He hasn't done that so far. I think McLeod's had a pretty good camp the last 2 days, had a really good block on a Debo screen, caught a touchdown 2 days ago. I think this receiving group looks the exact same as it did last year. Debo, Ayuk, McLeod, Jennings, and then Gray. Conley's fighting and Bell's fighting, but I think this group may look the exact same it did last year, with Bell probably on the practice squad, which I think that's what they want. I think they want to stash him for a year, and then next year hope he comes along. They do that with everybody, it seems like. They draft late in the rounds. If they can get you late, they'll stash you for a year, let your body grow, let you get experience, then take over next year. I think that's the plan for him right now. He's shown some potential. I like him a lot, but I think it's going to take time for him to actually kind of make it in the NFL. But again, it's 6 days into camp. So many things can happen, but he's showing progress already early, which is a good sign.
Yeah, that's what you want out of him. And I think that's the plan. They're going to develop him to be that third receiver down the road. So I think that's what's going to happen. Like, I see Ronnie Bell's traits. He's not a fast receiver. He is the kind of guy that will make the tough catches. He's a guy that's willing to block and all that stuff. So that's what really makes him a fit to this offense. So he doesn't need to be the Danny Grays or the Debos of the world, man. Just do your dirty work and you're good, man. The catches, like you said, he just needs to be consistent, and I think he'll take care of itself. And I've heard mixed reviews of Avery Thomas. I think what made Avery Thomas look good during camp this time was because Steve Wilks coached him up. Steve Wilks, yeah. I mean, have you seen the difference how the secondaries had look? Like, Steve Wilks is just getting them a coach up a little bit.
Yeah, there was a play yesterday in 1v1s. The first play, actually, it was Ambry Thomas against Brandon Ayuk, which has been must-watch every single day at camp. They are constantly going against each other, and it's usually Ayuk wins, and it doesn't mean Thomas is bad in coverage. It just means Ayuk is amazing. But as soon as the drill was over, it was a physical, like the guy they were fighting at the line of scrimmage. Ambry Thomas and Ayuk were going at it. Ayuk caught the football, Wilkes ran over to Thomas and immediately started coaching him up. And you can tell there was this hands-on approach with Thomas. And to me, that told me that he has a lot of confidence when Ambry Thomas can be. We saw in 2021 down the stretch. I know there was some mixed games in there against Atlanta and the Bengals. I get that stuff, but down the stretch, he was pretty good until that last game against the Rams, right? And unplayable last year. What was happening there? I think Steve Wilkes can be that breath of fresh air that Ambry Thomas really needs back there. You can tell Wilkes likes what he sees in him. He has confidence in him. He's taking first team reps. I mean, come on. Like, he wouldn't do that if he didn't believe in you, or at least he's trying to test him to see what he can be. And Thomas is fighting every single rep, fighting every single day. I think he's been sticky in most of his plays and coverage. I like what I see from him. You have to prove it come game day. I understand that, but you're going against the best route running, or at least one of the best route runners in football every single day. How can you not get better in that case? People can say he stinks. I get that last year put a bad taste in many people's mouths, but I have high hopes for him this year.
Oh, so he might still make the team because he knows the system. That might be the only obvious choice, but I feel like there's a lot of good DBs out there. I mean, Deshaun Jameson is that guy I'm hearing about.
Yeah.
Like, man, this guy is just making plays, and he's actually been – I think he hasn't allowed a single catch, right?
I wouldn't say that. He allowed one a couple days ago, and I think he allowed one yesterday as well. But to give you some insight here, Deshaun Jameson, an undrafted free agent rookie on the team who you would expect not to make the team just on paper, he's taking second-team reps now. Now, that's because Mooney Ward has been limited in practice, so maybe that's slid him up, but he's earned that. Going against guys like Ayuk and Debo and Jennings and even Danny Graham-McLeod, like a young defensive back who is a really good kick returner and punt returner, adds versatility. Like, when I talk about wanting every single rep and you see a guy hungry to make a play every single snap, that is Deshaun Jameson. I like what I see from him. Does he make the team? It's going to be tough because you already have your three cemented starters, and there's Womack and Thomas, and that leaves that sixth guy. Dante Johnson isn't here anymore. Someone has to replace him. Why not Deshaun Jameson? He has some upside. I like what he can do, and he's also really versatile special teamer. And he's so aggressive in coverage in a good way. Like, he's always has his hands near the ball. But my bigger question would be, does Deshaun Jameson fall to the seventh cornerback position if Darrell Luter is healthy? That's my question. To me, there might be too many guys in the room for him to actually make the team, but I don't think he's someone that will get picked up off waivers somewhere else. So I think they can retain him even if he technically is cut.
Man, I'm just hoping that he doesn't get snagged because I think he could be a nice player to develop. I mean, Darrell Luter is a fifth-round pick, so I think they really like this kid. Steve Wilkes was talking good things about him. I feel like the safety position isn't quite an issue as far as, like, talent-wise. I mean, how do you feel about Jair Brown and the rest of the secondary, like the safeties?
Yeah, first I'll answer the question on screen. I worked there for 4 years now, but going back to Jair Brown, Jair Brown's been taking primarily second-team reps during training camp. He did get some first-team reps during OTAs and minicamp, not much thus far through training camp. We haven't seen much from him when it comes to the playmaking side of him. Brandon Ayuk talked it up a lot during OTAs and minicamp, saying he has like 7 picks thus far.
That's what I heard.
None of those have happened when the media is there. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. I'm not calling Ayuk a liar, but when the media has been there, when fans have been there, that hasn't happened just yet. Obviously, he's shown he can do it at BYU. I think he was like top 5 in picks last year in college football, I believe, as 4 safeties. But right now, he looks like he's this team's 4th safety. You have Gibson, you have Ufunga, and George Odom is getting a ton of reps with the first team as they mix in together during the rotations. Being a special teams guy, Odom is playing very aggressive. He's coming downhill hard. He's wanting to hit guys. He is hitting guys. And for a player who's a former All-Pro, second team even last year, like, you can tell he's coming in saying, I'm not losing my job to a rookie. And he's adding value to what this team wants to do defensively. You like seeing a vet being pushed, and Odom is answering the call. Jair Brown, I think, is going to find himself in those 3 safety sets where there's 2 high and 1 playing that nickel kind of rover role. I think that's where he'll be. But right now, he's been that four string safety above Hawkins in Hartsfield. He'll make the team, obviously, but there really hasn't been much to take away from his camp thus far.
So he's kind of been quiet throughout camp this time.
Yeah.
So when you look at the rest of the linebackers, I think this is probably the best group I've seen so far. Like I've been so impressed when you look at guys like we drafted in the late rounds. Like you got D. Winters and Jalen Graham, but then you got guys like Marceline McQuarrie Ball. You got Flanagan Fells. You were talking about, man. How do you feel about these linebackers, man? It just seems like there's a lot, and then you got Oren Burks too. So
Yeah, I think there are three cemented guys making this team. Warner, obviously, and Greenlaw are making this team by far, all pros, best duo in the NFL. Then you have Oren Burks, veteran player, signed here last year, special teamer, has value in many facets of the game. He backed up Fred Warner last year, so he kind of already has that role in his utility belt, you could say. I have liked what I've seen from McCrary Ball over anybody else. We saw him last year flash during preseason. I know he caught Larry Kruger's eye.
Larry Kruger's like pretty high on this guy.
Oh, he loves him. And for a good reason. McCrary Ball, I believe, is a converted safety, and he's really shown the ability to lead. He's playing Mike linebacker. He's breaking down huddles, breaking down the defense. And I think for a young player like him, this team doesn't want to have Oren Burks on the team. And what I mean by that is they want a younger, cheaper player that's more versatile, backing up they're already, all pro level linebackers. Oren Burks is fine. He isn't the answer to be a backup of all backups, right? They want guys like Winters and Ball to step up. McCrary Ball is answering the call. I think right now he's in the lead for that fourth linebacking spot behind Burks and obviously Greenlaw and Warner. Oren Burks, though, has had a pretty good camp as well. We haven't seen much of D. Winters outside of yesterday. Almost had a pick off of Sam Darnold. He was really good in coverage. I think Jalen Graham was pretty good in run defense yesterday. You can tell that even though there hasn't been a lot to take away from them, every day there seems to be one play you go, oh yeah, that guy's still there, and that guy's still there. And I think it's it's a good thing for a young player to have guys in the building like Fred Warner and Greenlaw to say, look, I was a 5th round pick, I was a 3rd round pick. These things take time. Like you're not going to be Fred Warner day one, outplaying Reuben Foster, right? You're not going to be this all-pro day one, and having guys in the building like Dre Greenlaw who had to wait his turn, and then when he got his opportunity, boom, he was an all-pro, right? In the past few years. And so for guys like Ball and Graham and Winters, they're not going to play early this season, or at least they shouldn't, in my opinion, but they have potential. They like all three of them. I do wonder what Jalen Graham's role is going to be, because in college he played linebacker, but also kind of played this hybrid safety role. He has to pick one. You can't play both, unfortunately. And so for him, I think it could take a year to get his body to be a linebacker compared to a linebacker safety hybrid. I like him a lot. He's really quick. He can cover slot receivers as a linebacker currently. I like that stuff, but they want him to be a linebacker. I think it might take time for him to get his body in right. But D. Winters, I think, right now is going to be a practice squad guy, unless they value the potential. If they value the potential and don't want to risk losing him, like Brock Purdy last year, he can easily make this team. Demetrius Flanagan Falls, I always go back to the fact they cut him early in the offseason and they re-signed him to a cheaper deal. To me, that indicates they don't value him as high as maybe they did last year and view one of the younger guys with higher potential as could make this team. But he's had a good camp so far, had a would-be sack yesterday, and this linebacker group is really, really deep. It has a lot of young talent on it, and I really think when you look at it, they're probably going to keep 4 of these guys on the main roster. Warner, Greenlaw, Burks, and McCrary Ball are my picks right now.
So that wouldn't be like that would be pretty obvious, because McQuarrie Ball is like, he's ascending, and yeah, he was a safety playing out of college, and usually the Niners value that position because you got to have that background to cover, because they're going to want you to cover in coverage. I've seen some clips from the preseason last year. McQuarrie Ball was making plays all over the field, but I've heard a lot of buzz about this guy, so I'm just hoping we don't lose those other young linebackers, because we can't cut. I don't know. I mean, D. Winters seems like it might take him a year to develop. So I think Jalen Graham would be a nice project too. So, I mean, but McQuarrie Ball is ascending, so it's kind of hard to ignore that. And he did play safety, and he's adding some body weight. And this guy's looking shizzle as hell too.
Yeah, I think with McQuarrie Ball, it's always been, how is he going to get on the field and prove himself? And what are you going to be? Like they tried the Marcel Harris type guy before. He was fine. He had one big play in his career against Lamar Jackson in the rain in Baltimore. That was kind of it. Um, but for McCrary Ball, he has finally become a linebacker in the NFL. He's been really good in coverage in camp. He really has found this role of leader for that second team defense, and they like him. You can tell they like him and they want to give him a chance to make this team. And so you keep your eye on him. He should make this team coming out of camp. I truly believe that.
I think it's hard to ignore it because he's already like he's signing a prove it deal and he's already coming here in better shape. He's already like trying to adjust to the position. So usually for a guy that comes out of college, the Niners just seem to like those guys that have that safety background for some reason. Like you got to cover or else you're not on the field, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's really more of we need you to be a great tackler against the run and fast enough to be in coverage and make up the ground. If it's a dump off, we need you to come attack that running back out of the backfield. But also you have to cover a receiver or a fast tight end. Warner and Greenlaw can do those things. Burks isn't as great as them, but they value that safety linebacker hybrid because usually they're pretty good in coverage, but they want guys that can lay that wood. And McCrary Ball is one of those guys. Graham and Winters are one of those guys. Like they want hard-hitting coverage linebackers. And I think, when it's all said and done, they got like 4 of them in the room right now and 2 guys who can actually be that one day.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe they might find some ways to maybe Burks might be the guy they might trade. Maybe they might try to make room for that one player, man. We don't know. But I think Burks is obvious the choice. I think because he knows the system. He's already been with the team last year. McCrary Ball is ascending, so maybe he can make a run for his own money.
Yeah, and you have to ask yourself, who's going to take Azeez Al-Shire's job, right? I think that right now, I think they would like that to be McCrary Ball and let Oren Burks be the special teamer and back up Fred Warner. That makes the most sense to me. But it's about how you can make yourself the most valuable. If guys like DFF and Winters and Graham are really good on special teams, but McCrary Ball is really good at linebacker, but not at special teams, they may elect to keep that special teams guy because they need that desperately. And so it just depends on what they like. Again, right now, there's 4 guys who I think are making this team, no doubt. And it's up for those guys to put together, the end of camp to point, when you look back and say, wow, they were good in every aspect that the Niners truly like at linebacker, quick, good in coverage, hitting hard, and really good at special teams as well.
Yeah, something tells me that Jalen Graham might be that dark horse guy I'm hearing about because I'm hearing a lot of good reviews about him, like his physicality, the way he makes the tackles, the way he's on the field. He plays a lot faster than what his time says. So it's like D. Winters does have speed too, but it doesn't seem to translate it compared to what Jalen Graham does.
Well, D. Winters is one of those players where he may have put the best tape of any linebacker on film last year against Michigan. But outside of that, it was really inconsistent where you said there's a lot of potential here, but it's not consistent enough to take early in the draft, right? But many fans, including myself, point to him as saying he's that diamond in the rough of this draft class because the potential is so high. But someone like Jalen Graham comes in, again, he plays a lot faster, kind of like Jair Brown. They play a lot faster than their 40 time actually is. And so if you're coming in, you're working hard, and you're really like, they have the vest that can test how hard you're practicing every single day. And if that's towards the top, that could earn you a spot here. Like that's earned plenty of players a spot here. If you're out there lollygagging, not trying hard enough, they're going to know because they test your vest. They can tell by the meter on your jersey and your vest on your uniform. They know if you're out there not trying hard, oh, you got a 45 today instead of a 95. They know these things. And if you're out there busting your butt, they're going to give you a reward for that, whether it's making the team or on the practice squad.
Yeah, it's one or the other. But we'll find out during preseason. But, when we look at the rest of the positions, the pass rush, who can be the backups behind Bosa and Drake Jackson? How do you feel about this depth?
Well, Jackson and Farrell have actually shown pretty well. I think Farrell was better 2 days ago. Obviously, the strip sack of Brock Purdy was scary, but Drake Jackson going against Trent Williams kind of got his first taste of what a all-pro left tackle looks like this year. And Jackson didn't fare well, which no one expected him to. But I do like what Drake Jackson has shown. Hargrave's getting double teamed like anybody else the most on the field right now. Then you add in Nick Bosa, like it's going to make Drake Jackson's job a lot easier once Bosa gets back in the building. But when you're out there, you're seeing one-on-ones and you're seeing, Drake Jackson go and is tear up backup right tackles and left tackles, seeing him go against and learn from Trent Williams. I am really excited for him. Trent Williams said during his press conference he has an all-pro body. He's put in the work. Colton McKivitz yesterday said that, last year he kind of hit that rookie way of, I'm going to do things my way and my body isn't right just yet. But he's put in the work and everyone is really excited for him. And again, if your teammates believe in you and they instill confidence in you, that says a lot knowing it's this team doing that, a team ready to go win a championship. I'm really high on him. My question would be, who is Austin Bryant? Is he the same guy who can kind of come in and be a spark plug like he was for Detroit last year in a small sample size? Robert Beal, I believe, is currently injured. He didn't play the last two practices. Not sure exactly why. So can he be that speed rusher? I don't know. But those first 3 or 4 guys have really impressed. Kerry Hyder's still doing his thing, 7 years now in the NFL? But my question would be after those two. I don't have a concern for Farrell. I don't have a concern for Jackson. But my question would be, who is Austin Bryant? Can Beal actually produce for this team? And so forth and beyond them, it's like, who are these guys and what are they going to be this year?
Yeah, well, we just signed Taco Charlton, so he seems like I guess he had a good impression his debut in training camp.
Yeah, like the second play he was in, he got a sack or a would-be sack against a third team left tackle. I believe it was Leroy Watson, I believe. He just blew him up. Later in practice, he almost upended Ty Davis Price because he just got in the way of in a good run blocking and got in the way and stuff. So he's shown in one practice that he's probably better than a third string defensive lineman, but there's so many guys in front of him. And I do think with Taco Charlton, it's one of those things where you sign him in camp, don't expect much. He can easily get cut if Austin Bryant comes back to full health and Nick Bosa is back in the building, and you wouldn't bat an eye. But he actually, being a former first-round pick, he has potential, and he's still relatively young. The issue with him was always character. This organization has a great reputation of bringing in, good character players, good character coaches, getting things right. When Shanahan and Lynch got here, they made it a point to get rid of bad character. Now, not every single person here was bad character, but they got rid of certain people who were bad character, get rid of distractions. They bring in Taco Charlton, who has had issues in the past, surround him with Nick Bosa and Hargrave and Armstead and other guys like Kittle and Warner. That can make an impression on him and actually get him focused of, hey, you're a former first-round pick. You have the ability physically. Let's figure this thing out mentally. He can easily get cut. Again, wouldn't bat an eye, but he is somebody else in that room to look out for because the potential is still there for him.
Yeah, like if you look at it, like the talent, he's coachable. Like I think in Miami, he had a really good season that one time, and I think it was a change of scenery. But I think with the way Kasarik coaches these type of players, man, he always goes for those guys that underperform. So.
Right.
Taco Charlton's no other different. I mean, look at the track record of Kasarik. I feel like this is why Kasarik wanted this kid. I think he sees something in this kid. So maybe that's why he maybe he might have told the front office, say, hey, let's get Taco Charlton on a Tuesday since it's Taco Tuesday. Yeah. But, I feel like, the question mark going into this offseason, I know this is part of the one that everybody's talking about, not as much, but I think the kicking game is going to be different this year because you got Jake Moody, bro. I mean, I've heard the mixed reviews, but I've heard he's been consistent on the long kicks.
Yeah, I mean, he hit a 64-yard field goal in OTAs and minicamp. I think that got everyone really excited to go, wow, we have a 64-yard field goal kicker right now on our special teams unit. Yesterday, hit another 60-yard field goal. He missed one, and he bounced right back and hit the 60-yarder to end practice. I'm not sure how much you listen to the press conferences, but Schneider, the special teams coach, he made it a point to say that when they were working out Jake Moody, they put him through hell. They gave him the worst snappers. They gave him the worst balls and the worst conditions to test what he was made of. And they left saying that was the perfect workout of a kicker. And for him to say that, for him to come in and already be named starting kicker, to be a third round pick, the highest kicker, the third highest kicker taken in, I believe, in 10 years. Like, that matters. And for him to come in and not miss a beat, I think he's missed maybe 2 kicks total of like the 5 or 6 he takes per day, hitting 60 plus yarders. I think he is going to make Kyle Shanahan a lot more aggressive offensively this year. We saw last year against Miami where it was like 4th and 2 or 4th and 4, something like that, on Miami's, I believe, like 38 or something. And instead of going for a field goal with Robbie Gould, he essentially does a pass punt with Purdy. He was picked off. That was a plan, but you put Moody out there, maybe you get 3 points out of it, and you actually can leave, with a higher lead next time, or the lead next time. And my mind also goes to Baltimore in 2019. It's halftime. They're not aggressive. They run the football. They go into halftime down, right? Well, what if you're up at halftime? The Super Bowl against the Chiefs, you're on the football, get a big play, big chunk play to Kittle, obviously got called back, but I think Jake Moody is going to make Kyle Shanahan say, we don't have to settle for punts or not being aggressive. We can go get 3 points now before halftime. Or if it's 4th and 1 on the 38-yard line, this kid can make a 55-plus yard field goal easily. And I think that's really exciting. This team can put up more points. That's crazy. This team is putting up 30-plus points to end the year, 33 points to end the year. Then it's 36. Then it's 39. Like, that matches what Kansas City was doing last year. That's insane to think of.
Yeah, it is, because Kansas City scores like this amount of points, and then the Niners were doing pretty well when they got McCaffrey. So McCaffrey was that huge effect, but I feel like the offense is going to have to be a lot better this year, and I feel like the kicking game is going to be what's going to determine our season. So I think that's going to silence our doubters, because I'm not really sure. Like, yeah, Jake Moody has a strong leg, but I don't know how these high pick kickers, bro. I'm just not a big fan of getting the kicker this high. Like, I get it, but what happened to Roberto Aguayo, man? That guy was a second round pick for the Bucks. Didn't turn out well. But Jake Moody does have that strong leg, and he could be a weapon, I guess. Even Rich Eisen's such a Michigan bias. He's already hyping this guy to be the best kicker in the league. Watch. He's already talking about Jake Moody.
I think he has that potential. I'm not going to go. He's not Justin Tucker by any means, but for every Robert Aguayo, there's a Mike Nugent or a Sebastian Janikowski, right?
Well, Janikowski's even the good upside. Even Kowski's
right. A guy who can be your kicker for 10 plus years and be consistent, kick balls from 60 plus yards out, and no offense to the Raiders, but was your best player for a really long time.
That's not what we need, man.
and so for Jake Moody to come in and replace a really good kicker in Robbie Gould, who should still be kicking in the league right now, just amazing come playoff time in the clutch. But when you have that guy that when you're down by 1 point or 2 points, the game's on the line, 10 seconds left, and you're at 55 yards out, you're no longer running the football and hoping you can get a first down anymore. You're saying, Moody, get out there and win us that football game. That's a really big deal, because come playoff time, if he's making game-winning kicks from 50 yards out, 55 yards out, I mean, my goodness, that third-round pick's already paying off after being heavily scrutinized.
Yeah, it would not matter, because if he makes the game-winning kick in the playoffs, that's going to be known as, hey, that was a damn good pick. Like, let's say the game's on the line. You want to get to the Super Bowl. You get that game-winning kick. You're down by 2 points. You're just at the 38-yard line trying to kick a 50-plus yarder. And this guy would have to be the one to determine your season. Hey, Super Bowl on the line. You got a chance to win the game winner. Just do the Anna Vinatieri, man. Just as long as Jake Moody can be our Anna Vinatieri, then I guess I'm all right with it.
That's the thing with Jake Moody, is that if he misses those kicks, then you're saying – he's been a third-round pick on this kid. Bring Gold back in the building. But, I do like Jake Moody a lot. He talked yesterday in the press conference, and you can tell he's very quiet, doesn't get bothered by many things. It's kind of just like, I'm here to kick, and that's it. I don't care what happens. If I mess up, the next play, I'm going to get it right. And for Jake Moody to come in, quiet guy, replacing kind of a legend. And so you really have to go out there and prove yourself, but when you're kicking 60-yard field goals with room to spare, mind you, like, Shanahan's sitting back saying, I'm drawing plenty of things up for what Jake Moody can do this year for me.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this, because I want to see if he is the answer, because we moved on from a reliable kicker in Robbie Gould, so that's going to be hard to replace. But I feel like if Moody can do exactly better, then we'll be fine. But, hey, thank you for having your time on the show, bro. And you can tell everybody where they can find your social media platform and tell them what you do daily, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'll be down in training camp again the rest of the week, starting tomorrow, all the way up until Saturday, then Monday again. You can follow me on social media at 49ers_access is the Twitter. That's where all the training camp updates come from. You can also follow me on Instagram, 49ers.access. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel or the podcast, just 49ers Access. Updates daily, shows daily, podcast daily, reflecting on training camp and what happens during the season.
Oh yeah, and you do go on 95.7 the game too, huh?
Yeah, I was on there twice this week with Bonte and Joe Spadoni. Usually it's Joe Shasky, but the morning roast 2 times this week. Might go on later this week. We'll see. And also maybe even hosting Niners postgame this year, so I might be the first voice you hear win or lose on Sundays for Niner games.
Oh, I'm definitely tuning in for that. And thank you for your time, bro. And for everybody else, thank you guys for tuning in. And as always, CG's out and Sterling Bennett is out.